everyone, delighted to be here today and support this amazing event. I'm going to cover cancer and some of the topics and issues you might have heard already, but we'll be focusing in on the effects of nutrition and lifestyle on cancer prevention and recurrence. So what I hope you will gain from this talk is an understanding of how diet and lifestyle contributes to cancer development, how to reduce your risk of cancer, how to improve survival after a diagnosis of cancer, and what the national and international recommendations are for cancer prevention. So just as a means of background, from the WHO data, cancer now is the top cause of death in Canada. It causes about a third of all deaths. 1 in 2 Canadians will develop cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 will die of the disease. And every year there are about 200,000 cases newly diagnosed, and just over 80,000 people die of cancer. And of course 50% of these cancers are lung, colorectal, breast and prostate cancer, and I'll concentrate on these as examples. And as we've heard already, and actually the number I got is a bit higher than what was stated earlier, is that the Canadian Cancer Society state that 50% of all cancers are preventable, and a third can be prevented by eating well, being active, and having a normal body weight. So these are the list of the preventable factors, and our genetics contribute to less than 10% of all cancer cases. So again, from your Canadian Cancer Society, it's avoiding tobacco smoking, being safe in the sun, having a healthy body weight, eating well, which we'll come to in a minute, moving more, and limiting, I would say, avoiding alcohol when it comes to cancer prevention. So, there are 3 stages of cancer development. There's cancer initiation, which is happening all the time, every minute, every hour, when the cells and DNA are damaged by toxins and viruses, etc. But our body has an incredible way of repairing these cells, and if they are not discarded, they may just lie dormant. And in this phase of promotion, either we can nourish our bodies with a diet that's going to prevent this proliferation of cells, or we can further damage these cells and create more mutations and then result in deregulated proliferation, which leads to clinical evident lump or mass or symptoms of cancer. And then the final stage of progression is where it's really out of control and it's very difficult to do anything with lifestyle measures. And we've already heard that there's a whole body of evidence ranging from ecological and observational studies through to randomized control studies, which have come together in meta-analysis, and then finally in international consensus relating diet, lifestyle to cancer prevention, and particularly the emphasis on a whole food plant-based diet. So what are the observational data? So at a very basic level, people have been observing for over a century that cancer is more prevalent in those that eat the most meat. So cancer is most frequent among the branches of human race where carnivorous habits prevail. That was Scientific America in 1892. And then in 1907, New York Times says the same, cancer increasing among meat eaters. And since that time, we have got stronger data supporting this. So we've heard a little bit about the Adventist Health Study and the EPIC Oxford Study. These 2 large cohort studies have about a third of the participants that are lacto-vegetarians or vegans. So this gives us an idea of how diet impacts on cancer risk. And when it comes to cancer, in the Oxford EPIC study, vegans had 19% lower incidence of cancer, and lacto-ovo-vegetarians an 11% lower risk of cancer. Similar results in the Adventist Health Study too, with a 16% lower incidence of cancer in vegans and 8% lower in lacto-ovo-vegetarians. But in the Adventist Health Studies, they found an even greater reduction in the risk of female-specific cancers, so a 34% decreased risk of female-specific cancers, particularly breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancer when you combine those results, and of course, a greater reduction in prostate cancer in men who followed a vegan diet. Now, we've also heard that many studies don't have large numbers of vegetarians or vegans, but we have these amazing cohort studies, and these are data from the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study, and it looked at 5 5 healthy lifestyle factors in over 170,000 men and women. So these factors were whether somebody had smoked ever, whether they were a healthy weight, eating a healthy diet, physically active, and whether they drank moderate rather than excessive alcohol. And when they looked at diet, they used the Alternate Healthy Eating Index, which really gives positive marks or positive points for all these whole plant foods: vegetables, fruits, whole grains, unsaturated fats, which are obviously from plant sources, and omega-3 fats that can be from fish or plant sources, and a positive mark for low intake of red meat, processed meat, and other processed foods. And what did they find? So they found that if you are eating the best diet, which has got all those positive points for vegetables and whole plant foods, the cancer mortality, so your chance of dying from cancer, was reduced by 30%. If you had all those 5 healthy lifestyle factors, your risk of dying from cancer was reduced by 65%. And obviously, as a happy side effect, you also had a vastly reduced incidence and chance of dying from cardiovascular disease. And not only was the incidence of disease less, at the age of 50, if you had all of those 5 healthy lifestyle factors, men lived 12 years longer and women lived 14 years longer, mainly because they were not dying of cardiovascular disease and cancer. So when you bring all these observational data together into meta-analysis, what you find is that vegetarians not only have a reduced incidence of ischemic heart disease, but here in this analysis, an 18% lower incidence of cancer. And then a more thorough and recent meta-analysis from 2017, you can see in the highlighted box at the bottom that vegans have a 15% reduced risk of developing cancer in their lifetime. And here you can see what a great impact you can make on ischemic heart disease. 25% reduction in incidence in vegetarians in the incidence of ischemic heart disease. So the other aspect of our health that is contributing to cancer development is whether we have other chronic diseases. And we've heard about these chronic diseases this morning. And this study is from the BMJ, data from over 400,000 Taiwanese people followed for around 9 years. And what they found was that the more chronic diseases you have, the higher your chances of dying from cancer, and that a third of the risk of dying from cancer was because individuals had chronic disease. And if you added on top these unhealthy lifestyle factors that we've talked about, another 1/3 of the risk of dying from cancer was due to this. And we'll come to why, but there's a shared mechanism with these chronic diseases and cancer, and that is underlying inflammation. So Canada is really doing as badly as the UK. And these are data, your data from 2019, so earlier this year, that your diet is more than half of the food you put in your shopping baskets is classed as ultra-processed food. And this is not only important because of its impact on cardiovascular disease. Unfortunately, this ultra-processed food is increasing our risk of cancer. So this was a large study, over 100,000 participants from France, which from the Nutrinet Santé cohort, which is producing quite a number of papers from France, showing that these ultra-processed foods are increasing our risk of getting cancer. 10% increase in the diet leads to a 10% increase in the risk of developing cancer. And there are a number of hypotheses, and none is certain, but they're going to be related to the additives, the preservatives, the way we cook the food, like the frying that generates acrylamide, which is a carcinogen, and also the packaging. The BPA that can leach into the food may be important. We may not find out what's important for a number of years, but what we know is that ultra-processed food is not doing us any good. So a common question, well, what about, should we buy organic food? If we're going to eat whole plant food, should it be organic? What about the pesticides and herbicides? Well, data are emerging, and it probably is important. So again, from the French cohort, the Nutrinet Santé cohort, 70,000 participants from France, overall risk of cancer was reduced by 25% in those consuming the most organic food. And it makes total sense, and we'll come to the reasons why in a moment. And there's only one other study showing the same or similar data, and that's the Million Women study from the UK. And the particular cancer that is affected most by these herbicides and pesticides are non-Hodgkin lymphoma. And we'll come back to that in a moment. So, what are these mechanisms that are either creating cancer or preventing cancer? And they are shared by all the chronic diseases that we've heard about today. So chronic disease really is stemming from this ongoing low-grade inflammation that our diet and lifestyle is causing. And our food can cause oxidative stress. We can generate too much reactive oxygen species and not be eating enough antioxidants to counteract that. The dyslipidemia, the saturated fat leading to high blood cholesterol, and then the deposition of this fat into the cells and in the organs is creating inflammation and organ dysfunction. The gut microbiome is also becoming important in cancer prevention and progression. And of course, cancer is, the hallmark of cancer is deregulated cell growth, which can be promoted by the diet that we eat. So how does a plant-based diet help? Well, firstly, we avoid carcinogens. The diet is low in calorie, but really high in nutrients, these antioxidants and these anti-inflammatory compounds that really get to the root cause of the disease. A whole food plant-based diet high in fibre generates a diverse and healthy microbiome, the generation of short-chain fatty acids that is required for the health of the gut and for the health of our immune system. And it improves our hormone profile. So eating plant-based reduces your blood estrogen level, reduces insulin levels and insulin-like growth factor levels. So again, you are doing just as badly as the UK, and obesity is soaring. And sadly, obesity now is the second top cause of cancer after tobacco smoking, for those same reasons, the low-grade inflammation that it causes. And 13 different cancers are caused by being overweight. Some of our commonest cancers, so breast cancer and bowel cancer, but also some of the rarer cancers and more difficult to treat, the pancreatic and esophageal cancers. And of course, we've learned today already that our diet pattern makes a big difference in terms of our body weight. These data are from the Adventist Health Study showing that the only diet pattern to maintain a healthful weight throughout life are the vegans, those that are avoiding all animal-based products. And the mechanisms by which obesity generates cancer is firstly through generating high levels of estrogen, which drives female-derived cancers, by raising our insulin and other growth hormone levels and resulting in cell proliferation, and as I've said already, creates inflammation by releasing chemicals and cytokines that encourage our cells to grow. So, briefly mentioned by Larry already, but the WHO classified processed meat in 2015 as a group 1 carcinogen. It causes cancer, and this was in relation to colorectal cancer, but of course, since then we know it increases the risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer, and pancreatic cancer, to name a few. And red meat has been classified as a group 2A carcinogen. It probably causes cancer. And of course, we have to understand what this actually means to the individual. The strength of evidence is just as strong for meat and cancer as it is for tobacco smoking and cancer, but the risk to the individual is going to be less, but that doesn't make it any less important. So here for Canada, more than 5,000 cases of colorectal cancer are caused every year by eating red and processed meat. And what are the reasons for this? Well, for processed meat, the primary cause is thought to be the preservatives, which are the nitrites and nitrates, which are converted into the gut to N-nitroso compounds, which damage cells and DNA. There is also heme iron, which we've heard about already, which is pro-oxidant and pro-inflammatory, but it also is converted to N-nitroso compounds in the gut. And we mainly get this heme iron from the red meat. The cooking of any animal flesh, whether it be red meat or poultry, generates cancer-causing chemicals. So that is polyaromatic hydrocarbons or heterocyclic amines. And of course, when you're eating red and processed meats, you're crowding out the whole plant foods, which then mean your diet is devoid of fibre, antioxidants and phytochemicals that are so important in preventing cancer. So just coming back to the other carcinogens that we are probably exposed to, again in 2015, a number of herbicides and pesticides were classified as probable carcinogens, And when you look here, glyphosate, which we've heard a lot about because there have been some successful lawsuits against Monsanto and Bayer for causing non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Here it says there's evidence that glyphosate exposure from Roundup, for example, can cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma, as can pesticides and herbicides. Now, I don't want you to go away thinking that you can't eat a fruit and vegetable if it's not organic, because that's not the message. You're still better off being whole food plant-based, because these individuals, we as whole food plant-based, will have less pesticides and herbicide residues in our blood than omnivores. However, if you are able to make some sensible choices, then maybe think about looking at the environmental working group's list on which fruits and vegetables have the most herbicides and pesticides, so the dirty dozen, and the least, so the clean 15. So if you have a choice and access to this, then you can make some healthful choices. So just moving on to the gut microbiome, it's a huge topic, but if you're interested in it for purposes of cancer development and progression, then there's been a great review in Lancet Oncology just earlier this year. But essentially, the gut microbiome is really important in determining whether we develop cancer or not. And a healthy gut microbiome is one that is stated here that is fed by a fibre-rich plant-based diet, in contrast to the typical Western diet. And that's because these fibre-rich foods generate the short-chain fatty acids which are required for the health of the gut lining and for the health of our immune system. Whereas if you're eating red meat and processed meat, you're creating these N-nitroso compounds I've already talked about, and secondary bile acids, which are also known carcinogens. So just to think about the growth hormones that are affected by our diet, the major growth factor that we think is implicated in development of cancer, which is intimately related to our diet, is insulin-like growth factor 1. And we've learned a lot about this growth factor from the study of a rare group of individuals who suffer with Laron syndrome, which is a form of dwarfism, and they have a mutation in their growth hormone receptor gene, which means that they have a very low level of IGF-1, and they very rarely develop cancer. In fact, they virtually never develop cancer. And then when we look in individuals, typical Americans, so this was 7,000 Americans followed for 18 years, those who ate a low protein diet, so coming back to the importance of protein, more is not better. Low protein was associated with a reduction in IGF-1, and particularly those eating the most protein from animal sources had high levels of IGF-1 and a 4 times increased risk of dying from cancer. And we know that a whole food plant-based diet or a vegan diet results in the lowest levels of IGF-1 in the blood, and that's compared to a low-calorie diet and a Western diet. So just to move forward to considering dairy, and we've heard a little bit about dairy and cancer, but the strongest association is with the consumption of dairy and the development of prostate cancer. And the EPIC Oxford study found that a 22% increased risk of prostate cancer with dairy consumption. And with all things in medicine, there is a dose response. So a 35 grams a day of dairy protein increases the risk of prostate cancer by 32%. And 35 grams is about 100 grams of cheese. And it's thought to be the dairy protein along with the calcium within the dairy. So there's also this large study here that I've referenced, a large Swedish group that followed individuals with lactose intolerance. So there was 22,000 participants. Half of them had lactose intolerance, and they were compared to their family members who were able to eat dairy. And in the family members that ate dairy because they could digest the lactose, they had an increased risk of certain cancers, particularly hormone receptor cancers like breast and ovarian cancers. And here's some of the proposed mechanisms by which dairy could be contributing to cancer development. We ingest the bovine estrogen when we consume dairy. There's accumulation of pesticides, particularly the persistent organic pollutants which concentrate in the fat of animals. There's the bovine growth hormone, casein, which T. Colin Campbell showed very clearly in the laboratory increased the growth of cancer cells. Saturated fat contributes to overweight and obesity, and in North America, cheese is the biggest contributor of saturated fat in the diet. Lactose is broken down to galactose, which is implicated in the pathogenesis of ovarian cancer And again, back to IGF-1, we drink IGF-1 when we drink cow's milk. So just to briefly mention about exercise, this is really important for cancer prevention. And regular exercise, the recommended is 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity, so you're getting yourself out of breath. This leads to a reduced risk of about 13 different cancers. And the mechanisms are shared between exercise and diet. So it maintains a healthful weight, it reduces insulin resistance, reduces estrogen levels and inflammation, enhances our immune function, and reduces the risk of cancer recurrence. And just to restate that sadly for cancer prevention, there is no safe limit of alcohol. So around 5 to 6% of cancers globally are caused by the consumption of alcohol, and about 8% of breast cancer is caused by alcohol consumption. Number of mechanisms, again, the breakdown product is a carcinogen, it affects the gut microbiome, it results in low-grade inflammation. So what about plant-based diets for cancer treatment? Now, this is a seminal study that we've all heard about. It's Dean Ornish, who conducted a randomized study in 93 men with early stages of prostate cancer. His lifestyle intervention was a low-fat, whole-food plant-based diet with exercise and stress-relieving activities. And after a year, what he was able to find was that the PSA level reduced in the lifestyle group, whereas it went up in the control group. But more importantly, at 2 years, 27% of the control group had to go on to have conventional cancer treatment, that is surgery or radiation, compared to only 5% in the lifestyle group. And he was able to show a mechanism, different group of people, but in 30 people with early stages of prostate cancer, he was able to show that only after 3 months of his lifestyle intervention, the telomeres within the caps of the chromosomes had increased in length. There's no other diet that can actually do this, and I've only heard of one treatment, one drug that can increase the length of our telomeres. And he was also able to show that 3 months later there was switching off of tumour-promoting genes and switching on of tumour-suppressor genes. And similar data are now emerging for breast cancer. So the Women's Health Initiative study was the most expensive study ever conducted in nutrition. They randomized postmenopausal women to supposedly a low-fat diet, but emphasizing fruits, vegetables, and whole grain. They didn't actually meet their requirements for low-fat, but they did eat more whole plant foods. The control group just carried on as before, and they were able to show that if these people developed breast cancer, the women lived longer if they were eating more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And this is being presented at the ASCO meeting tomorrow, and it's an update from this study, and their conclusions are that adoption of a low-fat dietary pattern associated with increased fruits, vegetables, and whole grains significantly reduced the risk of death of breast cancer in postmenopausal women. The first randomized study to show that this dietary change can alter your impact if you have a diagnosis of breast cancer. That's their conclusion verbatim, I haven't changed that. And this again is a similar study looking at diet quality in men or women who developed colorectal cancer. And again, their conclusion verbatim, dietary patterns reflective of high intakes of plant foods and low intakes of animal products before and after colorectal cancer diagnosis are associated with longer survival. So, we're talking about this, the 4 food groups. We've talked about it today, foods that are composed of fruits, grains, legumes, and vegetables. And why is this so important? It's because it's high in fibre. Dennis Burkitt showed us back in the 70s that high fibre diets prevent colorectal cancer. And since then, meta-analysis have shown us that as we increase our fibre from 20 grams a day to 40 grams a day, we halve the incidence of colorectal cancer. Whole grains probably protect us also, and this is not only because of the fibre content, but the phytates as well, which have an antioxidant function. Beans, again, the Predimed study that we all know of because it looked at cardiovascular mortality, but what it showed was that the more beans consumed, the lower the mortality from cancer. And soybean is definitely protective. Echo what Lauren has said. It reduces the risk of prostate cancer in men and breast cancer as well. And this is a meta-analysis of 18 studies looking at breast cancer. Fruits and vegetables, so important. The more we eat, probably 9, 10, 11 portions of what we need to be eating every day, you significantly reduce your risk of cancer plus chances of dying of any cause. And these are the fruits and vegetables we should be eating, all the colourful red fruits and vegetables, cruciferous, berries full of antioxidants, and the allium family full of organosulfur compounds. I might just need to flick on a bit, but I want to show you that really I haven't been ranting as a vegan, I've been ranting what has been proclaimed by the World Cancer Research Fund. So this is the guidance published last year, 9 recommendations for everyone for the prevention of cancer. And I briefly touched upon all of these. So be a healthful weight, be physically active. When it comes to diet, eat a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, fruits and beans. Limit consumption of fast food. Limit, I would say avoid, red and processed meat, just not necessarily in the diet. Limit consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, partly because of its effects on weight gain, but also data emerging, actually in the BMJ just last week, showing its increased risk of sugar consumption with cardiovascular disease, particularly from sugar-sweetened beverages. Limit alcohol, I'd say avoid if your concern is cancer prevention. Do not use supplements for cancer prevention. And again, this means you don't need super nutritional doses of vitamins and minerals. You should be getting it from the diet. There's not been a single study that's shown that if you have a pill form of a nutrient that you can prevent that cancer. In fact, you're more likely to do harm. For mothers, breastfeed if you can, because this has benefits for the mother and the baby in terms of health. And again, it says, after a diagnosis of cancer, follow these recommendations, because data are emerging that you can really impact your chances of remission and survival if you change your lifestyle at the time of cancer diagnosis. So, what I hope I've covered rather rapidly is how a large proportion of cancers are preventable, how diet and lifestyle is contributing to high cancer rates, yet plant-based diets and other lifestyle factors can reduce the risk of getting cancer and can reduce the risk of dying after a diagnosis of cancer. Thank you very much.